Hello, let's go ahead and begin Chapter 6 of The Clay Marble by Mingfong Ho. Chapter 6 of The Clay Marble. After that marble, Jean too was interested only in playing with clay. She would spend the long afternoons crouched by the mud puddle, by the stone beam, scooping up handfuls of moist clay to shape little figures. For some reason, the massive stone beam attracted Jean too. She loved playing there. It's so old, so solid, she said. I like being near it. It makes me feel like a cicada molting under some big rain tree. At one end of the stone beam, she had propped some fantail palm fronds to make a thatched shelter so that we could play in the shade. When we crouched under it, it was like being in a leafy cave. We spent most of our spare time in there. I would sit in the stone beam, bouncing her baby brother in my lap as John Chu sculpted her dainty clay figures. I wish we could always be together like this, I said one afternoon. Don't you wish things would just stay the same? Jean Tu glanced up from the clay buffalo she was shaping and smiled at me. But how can we always stay the same, Dara? She asked. We're not made of stone. You wouldn't want to lie half buried in the fields for hundreds of years anyway, would you? No, I just meant that nothing nice ever lasts. I struggled to find words for what I wanted to say. What we're doing now, just playing here together, I wish we could hang on to it. That's all. Jean Tu put down the half-formed clay buffalo. I know what you mean, she said slowly. You try to hang on to older people, parents, uncles, grandmothers, and they disappear. You make friends, and they go off in different directions, never to be seen again. Everything crumbles so easily. Absent-mindedly, she picked up a dirt clod and crunched it in her fist, letting the crumbs of dirt dribble out. We don't even have real families anymore, she said, just bits and pieces of one. I stole a glance at my friend. I knew Jantu had lost both her parents and an older brother during the long war years, but she never talked about it. What do you mean? I asked carefully. What I have and what you have, she said, are leftover of families, like fragments from a broken bowl that nobody wants. We're not a real family. What's a real family then? A real family, Jantu said, grows. It gets bigger. People get added to it. Husbands, mothers-in-law, babies. I thought about this. It was true. My own family had been getting smaller, shrinking rather than growing. Was it just the fragments of a family now? I'd like to be part of a real family again, I said wishfully. You could be, Jantu said, and so could I. How? You'll see. Watch, Jantu said. She started molding her clay buffalo again. With small, twisted movements, her hands teased out 4 legs, then shaped a pair of horns. Deftly, she smoothed the rounded the shape until it had become a miniature water buffalo. Then, with a flourish, she lifted up a layer of straw in a corner of our shelter. Nestled in the straw was a group of other clay figures. Carefully, she set the miniature buffalo next to them. There, she said, they're finished, the whole set of them. What are they? I asked. Can I see? Jean-Tu smiled at me mysteriously. I didn't want to show you until they were all ready. And are they ready? They are. Ceremoniously, Jean-Tu took a clay doll and set it on the stone beam. Just then, a few drops of rain started to fall. Jean-Tu parted a section of the palm fronds and scanned the sky anxiously. Thick gray clouds had drifted across to block out the sun. In the distance, a clap of thunder sounded. The wind picked up and was sweeping up eddies of dust into the air, and the rain started in earnest, one of those sudden thunderstorms hitting on of the monsoons due to come soon. Jean-Tu stretched her sarong protectively over the pile of straw where her clay figures were. Hunched over them like that, she looked like a scruffy hen trying to hatch her precious eggs. I huddled close to Jean-Tu and listened to the rain drumming on the leaves. Raindrops pierced through the cracks of the palm fronds and felt light and cool on my bare arms. I thought of the long, rainy afternoons I had spent on the porch at home when I was very young. As light and cool as the rain, my grandmother's fingers would massage my scalp while I rested my head in her lap. Nearby, the murmur of my family surrounded me like a soft blanket. I closed my eyes now and tried to imagine them all sitting around me. Grandmother stroking me, father and Saroon whittling on the steps, mother stroking the embers of the cooking fire. It wasn't just the thick thatched roof that had sheltered me. I realized now it was a feeling I had had then, of being part of a family, as a gently pulsing whole, so natural it was like the breathing of a sleeping baby. When I opened my eyes, I saw that Jean too had a lost, faraway look in her eyes, and I knew that she was remembering too what it was like when her own family was whole and complete. As the rain died down, Jean too turned to me and smiled. You still want to play with my family of dolls? She asked. I'd rather have my own family back, I thought, but dolls were better than nothing. Sure, I said. Wait, let's set things up for them first, John said. She pointed to the puddle next to the stone beam. That, she announced, is the lake, the Tonle Sap Lake. It didn't look very impressive, but I knew Jean well enough to realize that her tone of voice promised something more, so I waited. And this is our village by the edge of the lake, Jean said, sticking a tuft of weeds near the puddle. She rummaged in the pile of straw by the stone beam and took out a small clay doll, about the size of her palm. Now this, she said, is my cousin Nia. It was a lovely doll with rice grains for eyes and bits of black string for hair. It even had a scrap of red cloth draped around for a sarong. I looked more carefully at that doll. Not only was its sarong the same color as Nia's, but the way its one tiny clay arm nestled on its hip and the slightest tilt of its head reminded me of Nia. It looks like her, I said. Jean smiled and set the dainty clay doll next to the tuft of weeds. That's Nia at home, she explained. Then she took out 2 other dolls from the straw, one taller and the other smaller than the Nia doll. She held both out to me. Who do you think these are? She asked me. Immediately, I recognized Nia's grandfather because the doll was holding onto a delicate wooden hoe, and the other doll was clearly Jean herself, complete with the tiny clay baby hitched up on her hip. Grandpa Kim and you, I answered with growing interest. What about my family? Right here. With a flourish, Jean pulled away the last layer of straw from the pile and revealed a miniature village with a thatched farmhouse on stilts, ox cart, a water buffalo, and 3 more clay figures. I saw that the 2 larger dolls were my mother and Saroon, and I had no trouble recognizing myself in the last doll. My hair isn't that messy, I complained. Obligingly, Jean smoothed some of the black thread away from the doll's eyes and handed the doll over to me. How's that? She said. And look, you even have a scarf. See? I saved you the best bit of cloth I had. Go on, you can wrap the scarf around her neck. That's the nice thing about playing with John I thought happily as I took the doll molded of myself. She lets you join in the game. Carefully, I wound the scarf around my doll before setting it down next to the dolls of Mother and Saroon. With that frown of concentration, which meant she wanted absolute silence, John arranged the dolls so that the 2 families were grouped on either side of the Tonle Sap puddle. The dolls stared at one another across the water. Now what? I asked, impatient for the game to begin. Jean sat back on her heels and studied her arrangement. Well, it's no use being friends, is it? She said, when our families are going to go back to separate villages. I could shout myself hoarse by the side of Tonle Sap Lake, and you'd never even hear me. But suppose, and here she reached for the Nia doll with one hand and the Saroon doll with the other. Suppose this happened. Jean paused and bent over the 2 dolls. Her fingers were deft and light as she molded the clay. When she had finished, she held up the 2 dolls for me to see. Their hands were now linked by a dab of clay. so that it looked as if they were holding hands. What do you think? You mean, suppose Sarun and Nia got married? I asked. Jantu grinned. Suppose they did, she said. Let's see what would happen. Carefully, she set the two dolls down in my village, next to the mother doll. She then pointed to the doll of herself, left on the other side of the lake. What do you think would happen to me then? She asked. Well, you'd follow Nia and come live with us, I said. Jantu grinned. Absolutely. Move me, go ahead, pick me up and move me. Gently, I picked up the clay figure of Jantu and her baby brother and moved them across the puddle to join my family. Left by himself, Grandpa Kem looked rather forlorn. What about Grandpa Kem? I asked. He goes too. Move him. That's right. I did, and saw that there was quite a clan on my side of the lake now, with Sarun and Nia, Grandpa Kem and Mother, Jantu and her baby brother, and myself all clustered around the thatched house. I liked that. They looked like a real family. We need to build another house, I said, for the newlyweds. Jantu dipped her hands into the puddle and scooped out a lump of clay. Deftly, she shaped it into 4 walls and put some leaves on top for a roof. There, she said. What else? How about some more animals? I've already got plenty of those, Jantu said. She rummaged behind another part of the stone beam until she brought out a handful of little chickens and ducks and another water buffalo. And trees, I said. We could plant some mango trees. My father loved mangoes. Jantu hesitated. For a long moment she was silent. My father liked mango trees too, she said at last, and her voice was strange, as if a bit of rice had gotten stuck in her throat. We had a mango orchard behind our house at home, Jantu said. Elephant tusk mangoes, sweet and long and smooth. She hugged her knees to her chest. That's where they killed him, between the mango trees. I saw it. Father put his hands up to his face just before they shot him. I think because he didn't want me to see him scared. Had my father been scared too? I suddenly wondered, when they took him away that night. But it had been dark, and I hadn't seen his face. Jantu took a deep breath. No mango trees, she said. We'll plant lemons and guava and papaya trees instead. I looked down at the puddle. Now it didn't seem like Tonle Sap Lake, and the clay dolls looked sad and misshapen. I don't want to play anymore, I said. Come on, Jantu said firmly. How can you dream if you don't learn to shut out the thoughts you don't want? She twisted a twig so cleverly that it really did look like a tiny lemon tree. Here, she said, that's where the orchard will be. All right, I said, and poked another branch beside it. And that can be the guava tree. We can even make some fruit to hang from the trees, Jantu said, and started to stick beads of clay onto the branches. And then we made plows for the oxen to pull and fish nets for the lake and even a cradle for the baby twins that the Nia and Sarun dolls had. We were just burying some rice seeds into the furrow that the Sarun doll had plowed near the lake when I looked up and noticed that the sun was setting. The sky had cleared and a beam of pale sunlight was shining on the miniature rice fields we had made. I knew that Mother would be calling us for dinner soon. Let's finish planting the field, I said. Jantu nodded and poked a few more rice seeds into the moist soil. By the time the field was planted, it was almost dark. The Nia doll was sitting near her cradle of babies, and Jantu gently rocked the cradle with one finger. It's time to sing the children to sleep, she said. And softly, in a sweet, clear voice, Jantu sang a lullaby I had never heard before. When the rain is falling, when the rice is growing, when the day is done, then my little one, my lovely one, will come home to sleep and dream. As she sang, Jantu's eyes glowed with the twilight reflected in them. There was a long silence when her song ended. My mother used to sing that to me when I was little, she finally said. Teach it to me, I said. And so, sitting on the ancient stone beam in the fading light, Jantu taught me the lullaby. I closed my eyes and rocked myself slightly as I sang, and thought of sleeping babies and full harvests and a home with a real family. And that is the end of chapter 6.